Alright guys, here we are with part 2. I strongly suggest if you haven't seen part 1 that you should see part 1, because it doesn't really make sense to jump into the middle of a saga. You know what I mean? Anyhow, it's gonna take us away.
But okay, so what about something like emotional intelligence, you might say? Human beings are more sensitive to pain than other animals. They develop complex emotional fears and attachments, not to mention the fact that we care about each other. This distinguishes us from other animals. Other animals don't feel the same level of pain that we do. They don't fear their own death, and they certainly don't care about each other in the same way that we do.
Well, some of them don't. I mean, I think it would be fair to say that most animals certainly have a survival instinct to them, but I don't know if you could ever meet a snake that could feel and love deeply, or any lizard for that matter,
in the same way that we do. This is a second argument in favor of meat eating. This, if you ask me, doesn't work either. Firstly, on the point of pain, let me bring up something that made my stomach turn when I first thought about it. In fact, of all the small things that came together to make me start thinking about veganism seriously, this may have been the most grotesque to me. Think about the fact that, as we've already said, an eagle has a much stronger eyesight than humans do. Likewise, dogs are much more sensitive to smell than we are, such that we can't even imagine what it must be like to experience smell as vividly and acutely as they do. Does it not seem reasonable that, given that other animals are more sense-driven creatures than we are, their capacity to feel pain actually far exceeds our own, just as their capacities for eyesight or smell do? It seems rational to think that this may well be the case. I said a moment ago that intelligence is an arbitrary metric by which to judge moral worth. The ability to feel pain, however, is not. It's a matter of fact, definitionally in fact, that pain infringes on well-being. It's reasonable to consider well-being the goal of morality, even if it's just subjectively so. And so if you're going to make the argument that the possession of some superior quality makes one species superior to another, then it's quite possibly the animals that end up on your plate who have a higher claim to moral worth than you do, because the only possible quality that has any relevance here is the ability to feel pain, and they may well feel it more acutely than we do. Ability to feel pain, at the very least, is far more relevant to moral worth than intelligence is. It's worth mediating on the counsel of Jeremy Bentham, who famously wrote of animals, "The question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer?" Why should the law refuse its protection to any sensitive being?
Because those sensitive beings, being animals, cannot reciprocate the same responsibilities that we can. And I don't mean to ask this question facetiously, although it might sound incredibly ridiculous, but as I asked in the last video, could you ever put a rat on trial for property damage? Have you ever seen All Rise for the case of this gray wolf versus the O'Hare family? And the lawyer walks in, there's a wolf, he says, "I call to the stand my first witness, Mr. Wolf." Mr. Wolf walks to the stand, and the lawyer, representing the O'Hares, the rabbits, he says, "Mr. Wolf, I have a question to ask you. Is it true that you and a pack of your friends hunted down Mr. O'Hare and ripped him apart piece by piece and ate his remains?" And the wolf replies, "Yes, that is true." No further questions, Your Honor. Have you ever... There it is. There it is. Have you seen a wolf be put on trial? No. And was Harambe put on trial? No, Harambe was executed. Never mind. I shouldn't be laughing, but just keep going.
Well, furthermore, even if it's true that non-human animals really do feel less pain than we do, that's still just not enough. Just because they feel less pain doesn't mean they feel no pain. We might say that if human beings have a pain receptivity of, say, 10, and non-human animals have a pain receptivity of 0, then we can justify the humans killing the animals. But we can't say the same if the animals have a pain receptivity of, say, 7. They're still suffering, even if not to the same extent that humans would be if we treated them the same way. This would be like justifying a small genocide on the grounds that it's not as bad as the Holocaust was. It's still bad, and it's still unjustifiable.
I agree. In fact, it's not really so much that like your argument is wrong here. It just doesn't really address the most important element or the most important point when it comes to the consumption of animals. And that being that animals have to consume other living organisms in order to be. Now, you would have to, because I'm pretty sure that this is the main thread, just based on your context clues here, is that the thing that makes it okay for us to eat plants, but not okay for us to eat other sentient creatures, is because they are indeed sentient. So, a question has to be begged here, and this is an inversion of your own argument, my friend, but name the trait in humans that make it that it's not okay for us to eat meat, but that it is okay for other carnivorous creatures to eat meat. Now, some of you people would probably say that we human beings don't need to eat meat, and so we shouldn't because we don't need it. But not needing something does not answer the argument. If the trait is that we don't need it, that would not explain why it's okay for other animals to do it. Well, they have to do it. I mean, they need it. Well, then I would ask, what if I'm in an environment where I can't grow food, but I can hunt? So that means that it's okay to eat another creature. So what's wrong is not eating the other creature. What's wrong is the necessity of which I'm eating this other sentient creature. But this can only work in a prosperous environment, and thus, morally speaking, if you start adding all these different tax and all these different loopholes to different things, then eventually you get to a point where anything and everything can be justified or argued against, and thus it would kind of be pointless. Or it would kind of lose its value more than anything else. So that would mean that the bigger issue would be a lack of need to eat meat versus actually eating meat itself is wrong. So, maybe I could agree with you, I guess. Even then, I really can't fully agree with you on that. Only so far as our bodies can continue to exist without eating meat. But as far as, like, do we not need it for all the other nutrients and its clear value, which I'll get into the value of meat in a moment, I still don't think that that would be strong enough a case to counter-argue against the fact that other animals eat other sentient creatures all the time and you're not taking them to trial for murder.
Okay, let's move on to something else. This might seem like an odd direction to move in, but I want to introduce you to, or remind you of, the political philosophy of John Rawls. John Rawls was an American liberal philosopher who Bill Clinton once described as, quote, perhaps the greatest political philosopher of the 20th century. In his famous theory of justice, Rawls presented a thought experiment that we could use to determine how best to organize society. Rawls asked us to imagine ourselves in an original position, as he put it, behind a veil of ignorance. You're about to enter society, but from this original position behind the veil, you don't know yet whether you'll be black or white, male, female, rich or poor. You don't know anything about what social characteristics you'll have when you enter this society.
Can I be a pretty white woman? Can I be a pretty blonde-haired white woman? Like that, that's easy street right there, man. All the people I could accuse of rape and all the money I could accrue for showing pictures of my fat ass. That would be the life, man. Whew. Could I be a pretty white woman? That would be fun, right? But you have to make sure I have blonde hair, though. Because otherwise, then I'd just be a basic bitch, and so can't have that. I'm sorry. I know you guys think I hate white women, but I don't. I don't hate white women. I just find them incredibly annoying. Just keep going.
It's from this original position, Rawls argues, that we'd be best placed to design society because we design the most just system without biasing it towards our own group. Essentially, we should organize society as if we didn't know who we were going to be within it, to ensure that we're designing it fairly. This thought experiment has been much repeated and much applauded because it's reasonable. Surely the fairest way to design society is from a point of impartiality. Well, let's see if you figured out where this is going. I was discussing Rawls with Stephen Woodford recently, and we're both of the opinion that Rawls' thought experiment should not just apply to human beings.
I believe I know exactly where this is going. I placed 2 cards face down and in my turn.
So here's my version of the thought experiment. This will probably sound really weird at first, but bear with me. Imagine the same situation. You're about to enter the world and you're currently behind the veil of ignorance in the original position. But It's not that you're about to enter the world as a human being, as Rawls had it. Instead, you're about to enter the world as a thing. As in, you could be any object in the world and you have no idea what you're going to be.
You know, honestly, if the odds are that stacked against me to where I could literally just be a cup and have people drink my fluids and then, well, not my fluids, but like the fluids they put in me. I don't think cups have fluids. I think I would just stay in the primordial field of nothing and just be. Like, the odds are so astronomically against me. Like, why would I even take the chance of just being a chair? That seems a little much, don't you think? Your analogy is way too broad and just way too much. Because then we would have to start arguing about the treatment of objects. Would I even be sentient as an object for you to even pontificate upon my moral worth at all? See how silly this is? Like, it's just too much to consider. Like, should I sleep? Like, should I recognize my bed or my chair? Should I recognize the glass that I use? The box I put stuff in? Now, of course, it sounds stupid because it is stupid.
So not only could you be white or black or rich or poor, you could be a brick, or a tree, or a mobile phone, or a pig, or a cow, or a human being. You could be anything. You have no way to know. Okay, so now design society. It's worth noting that, philosophically speaking, the particles that construct your being really could have gone to anything else in the universe just as easily, so this isn't trivial.
Maybe they could have, but they didn't. All those particles instead created some nigga on the internet that has a functioning cognitive system. So pontificating on the fact that maybe my particles could have gone to a snake is a fun mental exercise, but it's not something we should create or even begin to pontificate on how to create a society based on something like that. I mean, maybe I could have been born as a spider. You want me to construct society for spiders? Well, what kind of spider am I? Am I a big spider? Or are we just in the constraints of the physical reality we have now? Now, I go into society and I'm a spider. I spend most of my time in a corner picking off flies that get too close to me. What society am I supposed to design as a fucking spider? It's just too broad, man. And would I even have the consciousness to even begin to start trying to formulate how to create a society? Can spiders even think more beyond that? I don't know.
But consider the following. Knowing that you could be a brick in this original position wouldn't make you want to prevent bricks from being used in construction.
That's the only thing I could do with my existence as a brick. I mean, maybe I could be used as a murder weapon, maybe. Or maybe I could be used I could be broken in half on the side of the road because I'm malformed. I don't, how could you, what do you mean? Like, the only thing bricks can do is build infrastructure. There's nothing else they can do. Would I even be a cognizant brick?
If you were a brick, you wouldn't know you're a brick, and you wouldn't feel any pain. You wouldn't feel anything. It shouldn't bother you at all.
So, why are we having a thought experiment about bricks if I'm not going to be conscious to even consider my position as one?
You wouldn't mind being a chair because you're not sentient, so who cares if people are sitting on you? But would you mind being a chicken? Would you mind being a factory-farmed chicken? Of course you would.
Well, the only reason I would is because I would have the cognitive function to even pontificate upon my current existence there. You're making quite the assumption that a chicken could recognize the difference between being free and being caged, or that a chicken could even recognize that their destiny is to be eaten at some point in time, or that a chicken recognizes that the reason why it's stuck in that farm is because their destiny is to at one point be used as poultry. We don't know if the chicken can even think that far ahead, or if the chicken even has self-awareness to begin with. Well, I imagine chickens have to have some degree of self-awareness because they eat and poop and lay eggs, so, but if I was a chicken, would I be like the Samurai Jack chicken that, was a human before and I, know everything and, whatnot? Because if not, then the only life I would know would be that of a chicken, so, I wouldn't have anything else to compare it to. Kind of see the issue here?
And if you were really in this original position, you would abolish the meat industry immediately.
Well, we can only assume. We have to assume that chicken is mentally stable and that chicken is not misanthropic. Well, the definition of Misanthropic would be having a hatred of humans, but you could be misanchickeneth. Yeah, I know it's not a word, but you could be a chicken that hates all chickens and wants all chickens to be killed. And then you wouldn't want to reconstruct society, and you'll be totally fine with chickens being used as breeding slaves and killed and eaten by humans. Are we a mentally sound chicken? It's very important. I'm not just being pedantic here, I'm being very serious. Like, I don't think you really recognize, or I think you're overestimating the amount of abstract thoughts chickens have. And the only reason you could do that is because you're a human and not a chicken.
Bear in mind, you could still enter the world as a human and benefit from the meat industry. You simply don't know who you're going to be. And if you were a chicken, you'd have the same intelligence and self-awareness as any other chicken has now. But are you willing to take that risk? Chickens outnumber, I'll remind you, humans 3-to-1, so you've got 3 times as much chance of entering the world as a chicken. Nobody in their right mind from this position would design a society that permits the meat industry as it exists today. Think of all the arguments you've ever heard in favor of meat eating, about humans being superior or worth more, or how some people need meat for strength, etc. Would any of these even tempt you to allow the meat industry because you know that if you were born as a chicken, then your suffering would be worth their pleasure since they're superior beings as humans?
No, I'm just going to stand in the primordial sea of absolute nothingness and just exist and be. The bloody chances of not being a pretty white woman when I have the availability to restart my life is too much. No, I'm not doing it. You know, honestly, you can make this analogy work with us just being humans and adding a higher threshold of intelligence or technology or power there. It could be the gods, the ancient ones, you could say. Let's say you could enter the world as a human and you could be treated in an environment where there are these ancient, all-powerful creatures with technology beyond your very understanding, and they round you up into cages, and then they pick you out, and then they cut you into pieces and eat you. Well, I mean, hopefully they would kill you before they cut you into pieces, but whatever. They could be aliens, not even so much spiritual gods, but they could just downright be aliens, could come conquer Earth, or they could be a separate alternate planet where humans are indeed livestock and the aliens are eating humans like they're potato chips or whatever. Would you be okay with being in a system like that? Now, you're effectively saying the same exact thing, but there's of course a big difference here. That difference being is that we human beings have the cognitive function to recognize that something would be afoot there and that might not really be all that fair. But we're also making an assumption that we as human beings could operate on that same massive degree of intelligence as those upper echelon of gods or aliens or whatever. Now sure, this makes for a pretty interesting story to write, which, now that I think about it, it's actually a pretty interesting story to write. But as far as the thought experiment goes, it does catch the point of what you're trying to make. Would you want to live in a system where you're livestock and you're going to be eaten and your body parts are going to be used for something else? Of course, the obvious answer for any human being who is not self-deprecating and suicidal would probably say no. But like, again, which harkens back to part 1, nobody would ever argue their own self-destruction unless they are suicidal or they are self-loathing. There's no point in saying this. Like, you know people are going to automatically say, no, I don't want to live in that system. Of course no one wants to live in that system. The difference being is we as human beings have the cognitive functions to recognize an issue with a system like that. And the difference being is that any other animal that isn't living on a farm or isn't livestock is going to have a harsh life just in general because they have predators to deal with. So the long and short of it is, I'm not going to, well, I know, I think it's kind of better to live on a farm and eat grass and then get milked and then just go back and just eat some more grass and do your own fucking thing versus rummaging through the forest, picking up tiny little leaves and having to worry about a pack of wolves coming to rip you apart. I'm not saying it's the best life for these animals, I'm just saying it's a lot better than, well, that. And thus, my friends, that will end part 2. And so, we shall conclude this trilogy with part 3. So that being said, I certainly hope you guys got something out of today's video, and if you did, man, Click the like button. And sure, go and click that subscribe button. Kindly comment box below. And as always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I'll see you cool cats soon. Adios.